Genuine question. Why do people think the Americans can stop Israel? Genuine question. Why? Do you understand that our Congress people, the majority of them have handlers from AIPAC? You understand that the U.S. president has been sidelined since the late 1950s? I do not understand why people think that America can stop Israel.
You've also said that Congress is an Israeli-occupied territory. Now, what do you mean by that?
I said on the McLaughlin Group in response to a question, Jim, they said, do you think that the Congress of the United States will resist this demand for further aid? I said, throughout a crack I'd heard. I said, no, the Congress of the United States is Israeli-occupied territory. What I meant by that is the most powerful lobby in Washington, which Congress can't stand up to, one of the most powerful, is certainly the pro-Israeli lobby. It has gotten its way in this town year in and year out. And I don't think the automatic votes of the Congress of the United States for $3 and $4 billion worth of aid to Israel are necessarily in the national interest of the United States. And that comment, which is to ridicule the subservience of the Congress of the United States, is perfectly valid.
Do you believe there are members of the Congress of the United States who are voting the interest of Israel over the interest of the United States?
No, I think they're voting the interest of a powerful lobby, which they can't stand up to in many cases, one of many. They cave into lobbies all over this city. I think the Congress of the United States, where it's got brave men on both sides, is an institutional coward, and that when a powerful lobby can influence or defeat them back at home and they can't get much support on the other side for a vote, many of them who will even tell you privately, I can't stand up to that kind of heat, they will vote for it.
Everybody but me has an AIPAC person.
What does that mean, an AIPAC person?
It's like your babysitter, your AIPAC babysitter, who is always talking to you for AIPAC. They're probably a constituent in your district, but they are firmly embedded in AIPAC. And
every member has something like this?
That's how it works on the Republican side. And when they come to DC, you go have lunch with them. And they've got your cell number, and you have conversations with them.
That's absolutely crazy.
I've had 4 members of Congress say, I'll talk to my AIPAC person. And it's literally what we call them, my AIPAC guy. I'll talk to my AIPAC guy and see if I can get him to dial those ads back.
Why have I never heard this before?
Why would they want to tell their constituents that they've basically got a buddy system with somebody who's representing a foreign country? It doesn't benefit the congressman for people to know that, so they're not going to tell you that.
It's a genocide. I'm a congressional staffer, been on the Hill for several years. Processing like the images and videos, first-hand accounts, it's harder to stay away from, using the term genocide.
Have you heard any of your other colleagues express privately that they're just disgusted by what's happening?
Oh yeah, so many.
There are few institutions in the world more loyal to the state of Israel than the United States Congress. Giving Israel nearly $4 billion a year and almost $300 billion since the end of World War II, a sum large enough to end world hunger, the United States' relationship with Israel has been described as unconditional. In the last few weeks, Congress passed a resolution essentially rubber stamping Israel's massacre of Gaza. Few would expect any change to come from the halls of Congress. But in the last few weeks, we've seen staffers in Congress and executive departments express their opposition to Israel's massacre through letters and resignations. Tonight, we're speaking to an anonymous Capitol Hill staffer who's disgusted with Israel's massacre of Gaza and describes it as a genocide. When you see these images coming out of Gaza, how does it make you feel to know that it's people you're working alongside that are really enabling this?
Yeah, it's definitely like hard to work in like an institution like this. I always tell people, you know, kind of like be kind to each other and cruel to institutions. And like, I think there's a lot of, you know, moneyed interest that have like, you know, strong influence over, you know, democratically elected members of Congress who are supposed to represent their constituencies. When they're making these policy decisions for members of Congress, they're doing so with extremely limited information. So they'll kind of like take, you know, the talking points or the paragraph fact sheet that they get from lobbyists or other special interest groups.
So you're saying some of the people that are making these decisions don't even really understand the issues fully?
Correct.
Have you heard any of your other colleagues, other staffers express privately that they're just, you know, disgusted by what's happening?
Oh yeah, so many. I mean, I think like there are a lot in all sorts of offices, whether it's like, you know, someone who works for a progressive member, someone who works for like a, you know, more moderate, you know, Democrat. It's like, you know, in every single congressional district, we have levels of poverty, lots of unhoused folk, children who go to school, you know, hungry or malnourished. Like, hey, we got money for, you know, wars, but we don't have money to feed children. We don't have money to, you know, cancel student debt so that people can kind of move on with their lives.
You could have chosen not to speak to us. You could have chosen to just go on with your work. Why did you choose to speak out about this issue?
Yeah, I mean, I think like as a Jewish staffer on the Hill, it's really important all Jewish voices are heard. I think there is kind of like a generational divide among Jews in the United States on their perspective towards Palestinian liberation. I want to hopefully give other Jews on the Hill, and maybe Jews elsewhere, you know, some courage. Like hopefully, you know, they see this and like, oh, like there are, you know, hopefully they feel less alone and maybe more confident in speaking up in their workplace. Staff should speak up. No one can limit your free speech, even though some, you know, offices might try to. They really can't.
Do you have any message you'd want to send to the Palestinian people?
You've got some friends here in the heart of the empire who see your courage and who love you endlessly and extend a ton of solidarity.
We have politicians who say things like it's better to be a slave than dead, and they behave like a slave to Israel. They don't work for us, the American people. They work literally for Israel. Do you know that they have to write, our politicians have to write position papers about Israel? They also have to agree that if an issue comes up and on the table is Israel and Israel security, American security, you know what? They have to choose Israel's security over American. So again, why do you all think that America can stop Israel? I know you're going to say we can stop sending weapons. Do you know that Israel has agreements with aerospace companies? They can still get the weapons. Yes, they can. When you have politicians who say you'll be cursed if you go against Israel, or that it's better to be a slave than dead, and then they're running around talking about alpha this, alpha that, while they're playing below beta on the field. How can they stop? I will wait until someone answers how they think politicians who have been in office for decades, who say things like it's better to be a slave than dead, and they are talking about their relationship with Israel. You tell me. Listen, Israel has said that if they go down, everybody goes down. In other words, they have something called the Sampson Directive, very much similar to the Hannibal Directive. And it says that if they go down, they'll take everyone. And what they're saying is they'll commit nuclear war against everybody. That's not sane. It's not sane. I know other countries have the same policy in place, but those countries also value life. They value life enough to be willing to come to the table and make deals that move things forward. Excuse me. In Israel case, they're basically saying we're the chosen. You guys are our slaves. We'll do whatever we want. And America is our friend. But you want to know what? There was this cartoon. Anybody remember that cartoon with that with two? There was one character. There was always this little bitty character. He would squeeze him, and he was always like he was his pet, and that thing did not want to be his pet. I think it was like an abominable snowman and some little creature. I'm going to find it. Because that is what it feels like our relationship with Israel. It's like we're trying to get away and they won't let us go. Because they want to continue to use us.
Oh, what a cute little pink bunny rabbit. Just what I always wanted, my own little bunny rabbit. I will name him George, and I will hug him and pet him and squeeze him.
I'm not a bunny rabbit.
And pat him and pet him and...
You are hurting me. Put me down, please.
And rub him and caress him and...
I ain't no bunny rabbit!
So, let me speak to something different. There is an expectation already in the West. They're already saying on Western media, they're already saying America is going to be attacked by Iran or Islamic terrorists or whatever. Do you want to know who is probably going to attack? Zionists working for firms on American soil, looking to push America to get into the war with Iran. I think that I can look back on some of the attacks that have taken place in America, because I've had reads of all of them, sent them via email to the media. I think that we could probably look back on some of those attacks and say that there's a possibility that with the ones where they couldn't figure them out, you need to go back and look and see if Zionists were involved somehow. Zionists running false flag operations for the purpose of moving America closer to Israel. I can't believe I just said that.
It ain't gonna happen in 2 weeks. The president does not need 2 weeks. He knows exactly what the situation is. He knows who he's dealing with, the Ayatollah Khomeini. And I guarantee you, stay tuned, watch your phones, listen to your radios. I guarantee you, something is going to happen very, very soon. It could take a day, 2 days, 3 days. Let us remember, this is not just about Israel and the well-being of the state of Israel. Let us remember that hundreds of Americans, American Marines, American soldiers, civilians, were murdered by this regime over the last number of decades. Who would oppose that America take some kind of action to avenge the death of Americans who were murdered by these monsters, by these Nazis?
That's suspicious. That's weird.
But in 2012, I was on the phone with my father, who's in the military, and I said to my father, I said, there is a force moving across America trying to take it over. I could feel them. They're all over the place. And I didn't understand how that was even possible, because it wasn't, again, the focus was always on Putin. Putin, 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 Russia, Russia, Russia. And what did Trump say? Russia, Russia, Russia. You guys keep saying Russia, Russia, Russia. It's not Russia. 2012. Sitting on the phone with my father. And he said, you might not want to say that out loud because they're listening. You and I did. I grabbed my phone and went boop, boop, boop. Hey, if you guys are listening. So there's a group, I don't know who they are, but there's a force moving across the country right now, and they are intent on taking it over. That same year, I had a premonition of an attack, of a domestic terrorist attack, and there was one in Colorado with the gentleman who went into the movie theater. And with that one, I would have, I'd be watching TV like I am right now, watching TV, and commercial for that movie would come on, and I would I would get reading. I would get a reading about what was coming. And so for like 3 months, while the commercials were playing, every time there was a Batman commercial, I would get a horrific read about it. First read was, what the fuck's going on? I don't know, is it going to be a terrible movie? Eventually got to the point where I understood that someone was going to do something terrible and that individual needed help.
Why did this man kill 12 people at a cinema on a warm summer night in 2012? James Holmes, who appeared to be a quiet and unassuming man, entered a crowded movie theater during a showing of The Dark Knight Rises with a plan to kill. As the previews rolled and the lights dimmed, he pulled out a gun and began firing at unsuspecting audience members, unleashing a hail of bullets that echoed throughout the theater. The sound of screams and gunfire filled the air as people frantically tried to escape, but for some, it was too late. When the dust settled, 12 people lay dead and 58 more were wounded, their lives forever changed by the senseless act of violence. As authorities tried to understand what could have motivated such a horrific act, they turned to forensic psychology and Dr. William H. Reed, who spent countless hours interviewing Holmes in a bid to uncover the truth. Dr. Reed concluded that it is almost certainly impossible to ever fully grasp the twisted mindset of a person who could commit such a heinous crime.
So, a lot of, I'll end here, a lot of the folks like that gentleman who in Colorado who needed help, a lot of the folks that I pick up on who do these things, they are our neighbors who have been radically radicalized in one way or another, and they have reached their limit. And individuals like Israel and Christian nationalists are sort of intent on making the ecosystem hot so that those type of things do happen. They have an intention to make the ecosystem hot so that people pop off, like we just had this past weekend. I actually had a text ready to go out to a friend. He's a new friend here, also psionic. Had one ready, saying, hey, if you're going to be going out protesting, y'all need to be eyes wide open because there's individuals out there who are going to be targeting. So just be aware. And things happened. So I'll end here. We're in an eyes wide open situation, ecosystem, and I've been saying this since Russia attacked Ukraine. We're in an eyes wide open ecosystem, and that just means you're more grounded, more aware of your ecosystem, and more aware of being where you need to be and not where you don't need to be. Type of thinking. We were always headed here. I don't know any other way of saying it except that we were always headed here. From the moment that I sat in that church in 1979 and was shown that Jesus's name, the teaching of Jesus was being used to teach what? Irresponsibility. And look at the globe. I mean, just look at it. Look at the folks who are in leadership. The height of irresponsibility for self and for community. You guys take it a day at a time, take it a breath at a time, and take it easy. I'm going to chill out for a little while. Let's do a little correction here. Most people refuse to accept that the United States is a vassal of Israel. It's the other way around. I am totally willing to receive information that says otherwise. But currently, I live in the United States of America, where our legislators are being held basically hostage to Israel. And if bills or something comes up and it's an issue that affects Israel and the United States, they have to choose Israel. So I think you've got it backwards, or I don't understand what vassal state means, except that Israel is a vassal state of the U.S. No, they do the bidding of the U.S. No, not even remotely. That is the false narrative. The false narrative is that the U.S. is the empire. And so the U.S. is used as the boogeyman while Israel hangs out in the background getting away with pretty much everything. And that is coming to an end completely. I kid you not, I wrote, you may not know, I don't know how long you've been following me, Sammy, but I wrote forecasts to the media for 7 years about this time period. I had forecasts about the Capitol being attacked, forecasts about Israel being attacked, forecasts about Putin, Trump, 6 prime ministers with Trump. And so one of the things that I wrote in the emails was that I think the American people want a dictator because they're not listening. They're not listening to any ideas outside of what these I'm going to say it, these white men are saying. The reality that they have made, people are so used to that reality, that narrative scape, that they can't hear someone literally send them 7 years worth of emails forecasting the future. And so I said, again, they must want a dictator. Because prior to writing the media, I spent years talking to people on the ground. And nobody was interested. And so you are right. And it's been interesting hearing other people say this, because it was a shocking revelation to me, just around the level of the American people being uneducated about the system, and ways to defend ourselves.
The other day, Donald Trump said on his first day he's going to be a dictator for a day.
I like that. Yeah, I like that.
Would you rather have Donald Trump as a dictator for 4 years or re-elect Joe Biden for 4 years?
I would rather have Donald Trump. I'd like to see the repeal the Roosevelt law so that he can be a president for a lot more than 4 years. But this country needs a dictator. I hate to say that, but it's the truth.
What? Bro, what are you talking about, man?
I just came across the data with the Stanton directive, which is similar to the Hannibal directive, which Israel instituted on October 7th. I saw that you asked this question before, once more, and I wanted to get to it because, once I saw this, and I heard Netanyahu say, if we go down, we take everyone down. And I, of course, being psionic and telepathic, and maybe you are too, because you understand clearly exactly what they're saying and exactly what our legislators have been dealing with. So, other countries are getting bombed, while our legislators keep their mouths shut and stay in line. So, what this should do is a couple things. One, we should cease attacking our own people because they're being held by something that we don't quite understand. And what is attacking Iran and has been attacking Iran, basically. So this is one way of looking at it. When Israel came, when the U.S. gave Israel in friendship what was needed so that they could start the road to nuclear power, Israel saw that as I don't even know how to describe it, but just from a intuitive, empathic level, it is like they saw their spouse cheat, and I don't know how to describe it. It is their relationship with us is obsessive. It is it's not of this world. It is not of this world, and so it requires it requires things also not of this world to combat it. And so to be very, very clear, yes, Israel is saying that if they go down, if their narrative crashes, that they will nuke them and everybody else. That is what they're saying. And so my position is this, because I've already seen it. I've already seen that world that they are threatening us with. I have seen it, and here's what I know. I know that their descendants don't want it.
So what I'm doing here is trying to change the government, because this government is a complete and utter failure, and the only way they will lead us into the abyss that we will never come out of.
This government is doing horrendous things in Gaza, not in our name, and we want the government to take responsibility and resign today, right now.
They don't want it, and so that has shown us that our biggest asset is jumping into the narrative ecosystem and starting to tell a different narrative. I'm going to do another video. I want to keep this one. This is one of those topics that you want to kind of like, you want to walk really gingerly around. You're going to be very conscious of what you're saying. The Israelis don't realize something specifically about where I come from. And what I mean by that is the consciousness world that I come from. And the Israelis are part of the ecosystem, whether they want to be or not. The way that they're choosing to participate in the ecosystem is going to change. And because of that, we have to face this threat. We have to face the threat. What threat is that? The threat that Jennifer, you've just pointed out. So what are they saying to us? They're saying, if you all keep doing, they're saying that if they go down, everybody goes down. And so what they're revealing there also is that they've got nukes pointed at everybody. They've got enough nukes and power to take out the entire globe. I believe them. I believe them because I've seen it. I believe them because I've seen it. And so I love you. One of the reasons also why I love talking to people on TikTok is because y'all open me up, and when I start talking to you, I get ideas about how to get around this stuff. And so the way through, there is a way through, because I've seen us get through this too. I don't think that there are many ways through this, but there is a way through, and hopefully, we will get there. But Trump is right. They do have to fight. They have to fight. One of the reasons why they have to fight is because the Middle East needs to stand up for itself. The same way that Africans and black people, we all need to stand up for ourselves in response to this threat. The first place that it gets into us is in our ideas. And one of the most important places that it gets into us is in our ideas about other people and about ourselves. And so when I became aware in 2016 that there was something influencing the ecosystem, I remember saying to my wife, I said, something is wrong. Like, our friends are arguing with each other over nothing, and I feel like I want to argue with people over nothing. So something is influencing us. I don't know what it is, but I'm going to pull back on being on social media so I can see what's going on. And that's what I did in 2016, early 2016. And so what I became aware of was that the ecosystem was trying to push me into arguing with people that I didn't argue with before. It was heavy on getting me to hate my neighbor, to see my neighbor as an enemy. And that required me to believe the worst things about Republicans. It specifically about Republicans because I was voting Democrat. I vote Democrat. I'm not a Democrat, but I vote Democrat because Democrats, generally speaking, work to protect rights. That was a long answer to, is this what they're doing? The threat of them nuking us is why our government is so obedient. Yes. Point blank. So I'll leave you with this. And this is one of the reasons why our leaders, the blackmail that they have been under, the American people are going, when all of this, when it breaks, the American people are going to have to recognize that some of the stuff that's going to come out, some of it's not going to be true. Some of it's going to be stuff that has been planted, but just the fear of it coming out has kept people quiet. There's a lot of silence in the background that Israel relies on, and we need those folks to start to talk. And the only way, one of the ways that they start to talk is that the American people, we begin to say, you know what? Yeah, we need to know what you know and what you may or may not have done. We will reserve judgment to a judge. You know, the American people are going to have to exercise, we're going to have to exercise collectively together to get our people back. Something that we may not even think is possible. But I know it's possible because I know that we can get through this. Even with that kind of a threat, I've seen us get through.
Please tell me you understand. Okay. Just making sure we're on the same page here.
How does this small country exert such pressure on the United States?
Because the Israel lobby is quite wealthy and because it bought most of our elected officials. Biden received more money from AIPAC than any other U.S. senator. He holds the record. And if you stand up to them, like Jamal Bowman, they spent $11 million to get him ousted from his House seat. To challenge the Israel lobby, given the deep pockets of the Israel lobby, is they will punish you. You will get pushed out, and it's money. The whole system's for sale.
You know what? I also don't believe in welfare, and they shouldn't get another dime of U.S. taxpayer money, and they should not. So hold on. Their lobby should register as a foreign.
That's a good segue. Finish that.
And they should stop blackmailing our politics.
Got it. So back to Josh.
But you're in the wrong place. And he said, why? He said, because you should be in America. He said, why America? He said, because America will be the rising power in the world. There may be a world conflict. America will emerge as the great power, and America can make Britain do what Britain doesn't want to do. That is, recognize a Jewish state. Well, they went to America. Jabotinsky died, and my father continued alone during the during the war years, agitating for Zionism. He was all of 32. And he began, that's in 1942. He decided to do something that no Jewish leader did before. He went to the Republicans. And he went to Senator Taft, who was a very great senator, because Roosevelt would not hear of a Jewish state. He was absolutely opposed to it. He didn't want to antagonize the British. He thought that the British wanted to cater to the Arabs. He simply would not do it. He was a great leader, but it was for the Jewish people, that wasn't good. So not being able to persuade the Democrats, he went to the Republicans. And he said to Senator Taft to advocate, to put in the Republican National Convention on the platform, support for unrestricted Jewish immigration in a Jewish state. Well, Roosevelt didn't like it, but 3 months later, he had no choice. The Democratic National Convention adopted a similar platform. So in many ways, my father was the progenitor of the bipartisan American support for Israel. But of course,
Don't mess with the Israelis. Maybe northern Gaza is coming to a place near you soon, because there isn't anything they can't do, because they have 100% bought both parties.
My fucking friends were getting killed out there by this shit. Nobody gave a fuck. You know, now Israel gets involved and all of a sudden it's like at the snap of a finger, fuck it, we're bombing them. And that to me is like a slap in the face. That's like, so when it's Americans that are getting killed, we don't do shit. But when Israel's involved, then we're going to step in and do something.
I know war. What's going on in Palestine right now is not a war. It's not. It is the dehumanization. It's the genocide. It's the ethnic cleansing of a specific people to take their land. This is not war. These are people that are defending themselves. I see this constantly where people are just repeatedly dehumanizing these people. This is wrong. And there's nothing more American than speaking out against what's wrong. I can't tell you how many times I've seen horrible things, and this takes it to an entirely new level. The U.S. taxpayer is paying for this, which makes it even more frustrating. I'm paying for this. I am seeing what's happening to this. Whatever you can do, anything, this needs to stop.
There's this really interesting interview being circulated throughout Israel. It's basically this Israeli woman. Her name is Yasmin Porat. And she was one of the hostages on October 7th at the kibbutz. And in her interview, she says two things that are really important. The first thing she says is that when she was held captive, Hamas treated her well. That they checked to make sure that she and the other hostages were okay. They provided them water. They tried to calm them down when they were freaking out. And that they weren't trying to kill them. They were trying to take them back as hostages to Gaza. She says that when they arrived to the kibbutz and they took them hostages, they were asking them, "Where's your police? Like, we're here to fight the police." And she says she didn't know. And so they call the police. So Hamas and the hostages together go and call the police. It took the police 2 hours to get there. When the police got there, they immediately have exchange of fire. She said the exchange of fire was so heavy. And she said when she comes out of the house that she was in, she says there's all these Israelis that were dead on the floor. And the second most important thing of the interview is basically she says that majority of the Israeli civilians that were killed by their own forces, by the IDF themselves. Electric Intifada translated the interview for us in English because the interview was obviously done in Hebrew, but I think it's really important to go listen to the interview and also to recognize that Yasmin is not the first Israeli hostage to speak out about this. There are other hostages that are also saying that the Israeli civilians that were killed by their own forces. The fact that none of this is even on Western media, it really tells you that they're trying to control a narrative and they're trying to keep this under wraps. I also want to point out that Israel has this thing called Hannibal Protocol, where Israeli soldiers are ordered by the government to kill hostages if they are captured. I'm just going to leave it here. You guys should go listen to that interview and then come back and let me know what you guys thought.
ובמשך שעה דופקים 10 מחבלים בהיכל הממ"ד, צעקות בערבית. זה היה שעה מאוד מאוד מתוחה והרגשנו בפחד שלא יתואר. ואחרי שעה הם מצליחים לפרוץ את הממ"ד ומוצאים אותנו, את 4תנו, לבית ליד, שכבר בו שהו 8 בני ערובה נוספים. אנחנו מצטרפים ל8 האלה ואנחנו הולכים להיות בערך כ12 בני ערובה עם 40 מחבלים ששומרים עלינו. אני מקצרת לך את הסיפור כי
הם מתעללים בכם?
הם לא מתעללים בנו, הם מתנהגים אלינו בצורה מאוד אנושית. זה אומר שהם שומרים עלינו. כן, מה זה אומר אנושית? שומרים עלינו, הם נותנים לנו לשתות פה ושם, שהם רואים שאנחנו בלחץ, הם מרגיעים אותנו. הייתה תחושה מאוד מאוד מפחידה, אבל אף אחד לא התנהג אלינו באלימות. למזלי, לא קרה לי מה שאני שומעת בתקשורת.
קרו דברים איומים ונוראים.
נכון, אבל אחרי שעתיים, בקיצור, בהתחלה לא היה שום גורם ביטחוני איתנו. אנחנו אלה שהתקשרנו במשטרה יחד עם החוטפים, כי החוטפים רצו שהמשטרה תגיע, כי המטרה שלהם הייתה לחטוף אותנו לעזה. בסיומה במהלכה, אחד המחבלים החליט להיכנע, זה מחבל שיצר איתי קשר במהלך השעתיים האלה, יצרתי קשר עם כמה מהחוטפים, אלה ששמרו על הבני ערובה.
כן.
והוא מחליט להשתמש בי כמגן אנושי. הוא מחליט להיכנע, אני לא מודעת לזה באותם רגעים, זה בדיעבד. הוא מתחיל להתפשט, הוא קורא לי ומתחיל לצאת איתי מהבית תחת אש. אני צועקת בזמן הזה לימ"מ כשהם יכולים לשמוע אותי, שיפסיקו לראות ואז הם שומעים אותי והם מפסיקים לראות. אני רואה על הדשא של בגינה של האנשים מהקיבוץ שיש 5 בני ערובה ששוכבים או 6 על האדמה בחוץ, ממש כצאן לטבח מול הירי של הימ"מ שלנו והמחבלים.
הטרוריסטים ירו בהם?
לא, הם נהרגו מהחילופי ירי, תבין שהיה חילופי ירי מאוד מאוד קשים.
זאת אומרת, יכול להיות שזה כוחותינו ירו בהם? כשניסו לפסל את החוטפים, את החמאס?
כן, חיסלו את כולם, כולל הבני ערובה, כי היה שם חילופי ירי מאוד מאוד קשים. אני משוחררת בסביבות השעה 5:30, ב8:30 כנראה מסתיימת הלחימה, אחרי שהיה חילופי אש מטורפים, אפילו 2 פקזים של טנק שירו לתוך הבית, שזה בית קיבוצי קטן, זה לא איזה, רואים את זה בחדשות.
כן.
זה לא מקום גדול. וברגע הזה כולם נהרגו, היה שקט חוץ מניצולה אחת שיצאה הדס דגן, וזהו וגם.
איך כולם נהרגו?
מהחילופי אש.
מהחילופי אש, כלומר יכול להיות שגם זה מאש כוחותינו?
חד משמעית.
כן?
וככה אני מאמינה.
אוי, זה נשמע כל כך רע.
Christians that love Israel, there is something that you need to look up in the Israeli media that the American liberal media is hiding from you. You need to look up who this guy Hannibal Directive is. It's something that the liberals don't want you to know. Who is this Hannibal Directive? Look it up in Haaretz, the Jerusalem Post, Ynet, Times of Israel, any Israeli media. Look up who Hannibal Directive is. You will love this guy. If you love Israel, why are you not reading the Israeli media? Don't you know who Lavan Affair is, who Samson Option is, who the Dancing Israelis are? Do you support the work of Israeli art students in America? Are spitting attacks even that bad?
The IDF officers were also killing civilians and killing their own. And it wasn't clear because when things are chaotic, of course, we're not going to get the truth until much later. Well, obviously, this is a huge, huge story. And then people started saying, no, there is a directive, a Hannibal directive that Israel actually employs in certain circumstances. And our government just denied that they knew anything about that directive. Take a listen.
You talk about the hostages. Israel has a Hannibal directive in which it has orders in place to kill at least its own soldiers, lest they fall into the hands of Palestinian groups. And there's substantial reporting that that, in fact, was utilized on October 7th, not just against Israeli soldiers, but against civilians. Are we not now in a situation where Israel may be using the Hannibal Directive, not just on Israelis, civilians and military, but on U.S. citizens and other foreign nationals?
So I am not familiar in any way with either that supposed directive or those reports. And so
you've never heard of the Hannibal?
Certainly would not want to comment on
You've never heard of the Hannibal Directive?
So that's our State Department. Just moving on. I've never heard of it. I have no idea what you're talking about. People were called anti-Semitic conspiracy theorists. They were called Jew haters for even talking about that directive. And that guy sounds incredulous. He's like, there's no way you don't know about this directive. And guess what, guys? It turns out that that directive does, not only does it exist, but it was employed on October 7th. And this is again coming from Israel. This is coming from their publications, the Israel Times and Haaretz. And this is the tweet that they sent out. Documents and testimonies obtained by Haaretz reveal the Hannibal Operational Order, which directs the use of force to prevent soldiers being taken captive, was employed at 3 facilities infiltrated by Hamas, potentially endangering civilians as well. And when we go on and you read these articles, it clarifies that, yes, that an order was sent down basically saying that nobody is leaving and returning to Gaza. That is what the Hannibal Directive is. They want to make sure that nobody is taken captive, and they just say, kill anything that moves. And so it is becoming clear or undeniable that Israel killed some of its own. And so the question, I guess, that I have is, does that change the way that some people feel? Because we now have a lot of stuff that's coming out. Not only did they have prior knowledge that was given to them by Egypt, they also knew they intercepted, again, this is from the Times of Israel, a detailed plan that Hamas was planning on kidnapping 200 people. They intercepted that plan, did nothing with it. And then on top of that, we're now learning that they issued this directive. Does that change the way anybody feels? You know, maybe it doesn't. You know, what Dave Smith said to me, that he believes that it was just a remarkable failure, a failure in intelligence all around. And that might be the conclusion, that this was just a remarkable intelligence failure. But I do believe that the people that were so vicious in their rhetoric the day after, when people were asking meaningful questions, just trying to understand what happened without being reactive, but actually trying to report on facts, should also be reporting on this. And it's a very questionable directive. I don't know how people feel about that, and I know that people in Israel are upset about it. For whatever reason, it seems that people in Israel are allowed to critique the Israeli government, but people in America won't. That's very bizarre to me. I don't understand it. And like I've said many times, I am not quite clear on why Jewish Americans feel that they have to keep defending what Bibi Netanyahu is doing. Like, you don't have to defend what Biden is doing. You don't have to defend what Trump is doing when he's in office. Why are you so emotionally conditioned to believe that you have to defend whatever it is that Bibi Netanyahu is doing, even when it's clear that he has done a lot of things that are blatantly immoral? I don't understand that. You are allowing people to attach you to, well, you're a Jew, so you have to defend whatever Jews do all around the world. No, you don't. You literally don't. No more than I have to defend what black people do around the world that are bad and awful. In fact, I will critique it, because we should not ever feel that we have to defend immorality. So that is my spiel on that.
Before October 7, we were very, very close to a civil war on the streets of Tel Aviv, but Hashem had different plans.
ואז אנחנו מזהים 2 טנדרים נוסעים.
טויוטות.
טויוטות. ועליהם מספר אנשים, רב, שעומדים בתוך הקבינה, ומערום של אנשים.
מערום של אנשים מאחורה, גופות.
לא יודע.
או אנשים חיים, אנחנו לא יודעים.
נכון. ואני מחליט לתקוף את הרכבים האלה.
זאת אומרת, אתה חושד שזאת חטיפה?
כן.
אתה מקבל ממנו את הפקודה לירות?
כן. ואנחנו יורים? אנחנו יורים על הרכב הראשון, אנחנו יורים על הרכב השני. את הרכב הראשון דעתי פגענו, היה הבזק, המטרה היא כבר מאוד רחוקה, היא ב-2000 ומשהו, והרכב השני דעתי החטאנו.
אתה פוגע?
לא זיהינו שום דבר, זה היה קשית מצומצמת של... גם ראינו את הרכבים הם באמת...
Israel, the Hannibal Directive massacred Israeli citizens. We don't know the number, but it must have been a very significant one. The Hannibal Directive, coined by Benjamin Netanyahu himself, it is now officially acknowledged, was the reason for many of the dead people who died on October the 7th, which was then blamed on the Palestinians, and the rest is history. And what a history it is indeed. We knew this for a long time. We said it for a long time. I said it in my encounter with Piers Morgan, and he looked at me as if I was a man recently arrived from Mars, and that he could not possibly understand even what I was saying. It's been in the Hebrew press for weeks, if not months. But it's now in the English language edition of the prestigious Israeli newspaper Haaretz, and officially sourced within the government. This is significant not because October 7th didn't happen, not even necessarily because it happened with the Israeli complicity, although it's increasingly likely that complicity to a point was undeniable. It's not to say that there were no entirely unjustifiable actions taken by the Palestinian resistance groups that broke out of the concentration camp on October the 7th. But it is to say that we have been sleepwalked through the last 9 months on a gigantic lie. The clue was in the roofs of the cars in the car park at the Nova Music Festival. All of them had been savagely assailed from the air, and the Palestinian factions had no aircraft. The clue was in the kibbutz houses, clearly destroyed by tank fire, by shells of far greater ordnance than the handheld AK-47s in the hands of the Palestinian resistance factions. The clue was in the number of motor vehicles headed for Gaza with hostages inside them that were attacked from the air and eliminated, on the principle, according to the Hannibal Directive, that no hostage must arrive in Gaza, that no hostage must be allowed to arrive in Gaza, and that any vehicles carrying hostages must be destroyed. That is the Hannibal Directive, and it is now clear from Haaretz's groundbreaking journalism that it was indeed the order of battle of the Israeli forces on the day. That means, Piers Morgan, it wasn't even remotely the largest loss of life in the conflict between Israel and the Palestinians, even if the Palestinians had done all that killing, but they did not. It's now clear that hundreds, perhaps many hundreds, of Israelis were killed by other Israelis. And it just goes to show that you cannot hide the truth forever. You can keep it in the foreign language press. You can refuse to acknowledge when it breaks into the English language press, as this Haaretz journalism has been completely unacknowledged. There are people in Parliament still chuntering about 1,400 Israelis massacred by Palestinian guerrillas on October the 7th, even though they must now know that many hundreds of those, how many hundreds, we cannot yet know, but we will know, although they buried the cars. Do you remember that? That might have been a clue. They actually interred the cars that they destroyed. They buried the bodies, but eventually someone will succeed in court in disinterring their relatives, and then it will be clear exactly who did what to whom.
What is your feeling about where we are now with this war?
Well, that initial interview, there were three things that I stated. So the first thing that I stated was that Israel is currently in the ICJ charged with genocide. I also said that what Israel was doing in Gaza in an accumulative way over decades would amount with the military operation that they were about to launch to genocide. And the third thing that I said, which has also now been proven to have been the case, is that the Israeli military unfortunately implemented the Hannibal Directive on October 7th. And that, just so viewers are aware, is when Israel takes measures to kill the captives who are Israeli that have been taken by the other side. Now that happened on October 7th, and it's since been proven in 3 different cases.
אני חושב שבאופן טקטי במקומות שונים ניתנה, ובמקומות אחרים לא ניתנה, וזו בעיה.
הכשל של אותו יום זה הרי לא רק ההפתעה ולא היינו מוכנים,
זה גם העובדה שלקח שעות ארוכות, כ8 שעות, עד שהיה כוח צבאי משמעותי ביישובים. בסיס נחל עוז נכבש, יישובים נכבשים, את ניר עוז שוכחים, 251 ישראלים נחטפים, וכל התכתובות של אותו יום שואלות שאלה אחת, איפה הצבא? אתה יודע להגיד את התשובה?
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu recently made a powerful statement. If Israel falls, the whole world falls. But what does he mean by that? Many believe this statement references the Samson option, a term used to describe Israel's last resort strategy to use its nuclear capabilities if its existence is ever severely threatened. Named after the biblical figure Samson, who brought down a building on himself and his enemies, the Samson option suggests that Israel would rather take extreme measures than be overpowered. Israel is one of the few nations in the world believed to possess a nuclear arsenal, though it hasn't officially confirmed this. The Samson option acts as a deterrent, signaling to potential adversaries that any existential threat to Israel would have global consequences. This strategy reflects Israel's never-again stance, a commitment to defend itself at any cost. But with tensions in the region on the rise, many wonder, could this deterrent become a real option in the future? Stay tuned as we continue to monitor these developments. What do you think? Could the Samson option ever be used, or is it purely symbolic?
The Samson option. If Israel's about to lose a war, they'll fire all their nuclear weapons at once. Yes, this is a real option. Check it out on any search engine, even check on Wikipedia. And sadly, this is not even new. America and Russia had the same thing as an option back in the Cold War days. It was called MAD, Mutually Assured Destruction, where if the American or Soviet Empire was about to lose the war, they would fire all their nuclear weapons at once, so that nobody wins. It creates the incentive not to go to war at all. That's why Israel has a Samson option. That's why they advertise and broadcast it. The name itself comes from an old story out of the book of Judges, of the strongman hero Samson, that was so strong he could never be defeated and never be captured. Well, one time he was actually captured, and his enemies brought him to a temple to show off in front of everybody. So Samson was chained between 2 pillars, and he waited until all of his enemies were in the same temple all at the same time, and tore down those pillars with all his might. The temple collapsed, destroyed all his enemies, but it also destroyed himself in the process. Which is where Israel gets the clever name, the Samson option, because it is an option of last resort to be used only if Israel's borders are all breached and its enemies are flooding into its country. It will fire all its nuclear weapons at once, destroying all its enemies, but at the same time destroying itself. Mutually assured destruction. Nobody wins. Now, is Benjamin Netanyahu crazy enough to actually use the Samson option? For anybody else in power, I'd say it's a maybe, but for Bibi, yes, I really think he is that crazy.
Late September night in 1979, an American satellite picked up 2 super bright flashes in the middle of the Indian Ocean. The next day, President Jimmy Carter called a meeting in the Situation Room. Everyone agreed. This was a secret nuclear test. But who was responsible? The first suspect was South Africa, but they didn't have the technology. So the US at one of South Africa's close military allies, a nation technologically advanced enough to stage a massive nuclear test and secretive enough to pull it off in the dead of night. Israel. There was just one problem. Nobody knew for sure whether Israel even had nuclear capabilities. And this is still true today. Even though the whole world assumes they do, Israel will neither confirm nor deny it. But why? There's a Hebrew word for Israel's nuclear policy, amimut. It basically means deliberate ambiguity. Experts guess that Israel has between 80 and 400 nuclear warheads today, but nobody knows for sure. Israeli leaders have always been quiet about their nuclear ambitions. A strong military defense has been the cornerstone of Israel's survival since its creation in 1948. David Ben-Gurion was apparently obsessed with developing nuclear weapons, seeing them as the only way to protect Jews in their homeland. In those early years, France was one of Israel's biggest supporters, and the 2 countries worked together to develop both of their nuclear abilities. By the 1960s, Israel had constructed 2 nuclear research centers, Dimona and Sorek. It's around this time that Israel is thought to have developed their first nuclear warhead. During a meeting with President John F. Kennedy in 1962, Shimon Peres, Israel's Deputy Minister of Defense, was asked about Israel's nuclear plans. He responded with a line that would come to define the country's nuclear policy. I can tell you most clearly that we will not introduce nuclear weapons to the region, and certainly we will not be the first. That line was the birth of Amimut as a political policy. Israel has no intention of being the first to attack their enemies with nuclear weapons. By the 1970s, Israel's Arab neighbors, who had spent the last 2 decades waging war against the Jewish state, were suddenly worried. Like the rest of the world, they had no idea how many nuclear warheads Israel had. By keeping quiet, Israel let rumors fly across the Arab world. Eventually, these hostile countries stopped waging wars so often. Some believe this was in part because they were scared of what might happen. As Peres put in his autobiography, we learned there is tremendous power in ambiguity. Doubt was a powerful deterrent to those who desired a second Holocaust. In fact, there's a nickname for the kind of situation Israel would have to find itself in before they'd consider nuking their enemies: the Samson option, evoking the biblical character of Samson, who famously killed many Philistines in his final act, killing himself in the process.
Imagine a scenario where Israel implements the Samson option, a last resort strategy involving the use of nuclear weapons in the face of existential threats. This notion underscores the drastic measures that could be taken to preserve national security, yet it also opens a complex web of geopolitical consequences. As the world absorbs the initial shock of a nuclear deployment by Israel, global markets would likely experience significant turmoil. The immediate economic fallout includes disruptions in oil supplies and heightened risk premiums across financial sectors. Moreover, the environmental and human costs of nuclear weapon use are catastrophic, leading to a humanitarian crisis that extends well beyond the borders of the conflict zone. The political ramifications are equally profound. Nations worldwide, particularly those in the Middle East, would be compelled to reassess their foreign policies and alignments. Long-standing alliances might shift as countries seek to either condemn or support Israel's actions based on strategic interests and international pressure. Security measures globally would increase as nations enhance their defense systems against potential similar threats. In response to the crisis, international diplomatic relations would be tested. The United Nations and other global entities would face immense pressure to intervene, mediating a de-escalation of tensions and potentially restructuring international nuclear non-progression treaties. This scenario might also ignite widespread protests and debates over nuclear disarmament, reshaping public opinions on national defense strategies. Simultaneously, the use of nuclear weapons by a nation like Israel could set a precedent, influencing other nuclear-capable states and potentially leading to an arms race fraught with new dangers. The global community would find itself at a crossroads, needing to navigate the delicate balance between security and the pursuit of peace. This hypothetical look into the Samson option not only highlights the dire consequences of nuclear war, but also underscores the importance of diplomatic engagement and preventive conflict resolution strategies to maintain global stability and peace.
You're learning so many important things, and I'm so proud of you.
On November 2nd, 1917, Britain's Foreign Secretary, Arthur Balfour, wrote a letter that would set off a conflict still being fought more than 100 years later.
His Majesty's government view with favour the establishment in Palestine of a national home for the Jewish people and will use their best endeavours to facilitate the achievement of this object.
When Balfour wrote of his government's intent to create a Jewish homeland in Palestine, 90% of the people living there were not Jewish. Just 31 years later, most of them were gone.
לא ספרתי. אני לא יכול לדעת בחיי. היה לי מקלע עם 250 כדורים.
This is the story of the British promise that led to the destruction of Palestine and the creation of the State of Israel. Let's start with the obvious question. Why were the British making promises about other people's countries? The short answer, empire is one hell of a drug. This was World War I, and the British were making lots of promises. In addition to promising a Jewish homeland in Palestine, they promised Arab leaders independence if they rose up against Britain's enemy, the Ottoman Empire. The Arabs did. Hollywood even made a movie about it.
Arabia's for the Arabs now. That's what I've told them anyway. That's what they think. That's why they're fighting.
Oh, surely.
A month after Balfour's letter, British troops took Palestine, ending 400 years of Ottoman rule. The people who lived there were Arabs, mostly Muslims, but there were Christian and Jewish minorities too. There was also a tiny number of European Jews who in the late 1800s had started building small colonies there. At a time when many Jews were suffering horrific persecution in Europe, they felt Palestine could be an escape. The idea of building up a Jewish presence in Palestine became known as Zionism, but it stayed a fringe movement among European Jews. Many of them felt they shouldn't have to leave their countries to avoid persecution. But Zionism as a political movement took a big step forward with an Austrian man called Theodor Herzl. And this guy is a very important name in this story. In 1896, he published Der Judenstaat, or in English, The Jewish State. In it, he said the only way for Jews to avoid Europe's anti-Semitism was not just to leave, but to have their own country. And Herzl didn't just write. The next year, he organized a conference in Basel, Switzerland, the first Zionist Congress. The attendees agreed on a program which sought, among other things, to establish a Jewish homeland in Palestine and promote Jewish settlement in Palestine. From here on out, the Zionist movement became very active, setting up funds to promote Jewish immigration to Palestine, companies to buy land there, and recruiting representatives to advocate for their cause with different governments. A few days after the conference, Herzl wrote this in his diary.
At Basel, I founded the Jewish state. In 5 years perhaps, and certainly in 50 years, everyone will perceive it.
He was only off by 1 year. Okay, so that is a lot of history, but it's important because the Zionist movement is a critical part of the story going forward, especially after it found a friend in the British government, where a lot of high-ranking officials supported Zionism, sometimes for unexpected reasons. Prime Minister Lloyd George, for example, was a Christian zealot who believed gathering the Jewish people in Palestine would bring Jesus Christ back to earth. Others, like Balfour, believed that getting the Jewish people out of Europe and into their own country would be a good thing. Herzl was pretty visionary when he wrote that the anti-Semitic nations will become our allies. Meanwhile, the Zionists assured Britain that their future country would be a reliable ally. So that's the backstory of how European anti-Semitism, Zionism, and British imperialism all led to the Balfour Declaration, this British promise to build a homeland for Jews in Palestine. Now we're going to look at how Britain did that. World War I had been a conflict between rival empires, and the winners set up the League of Nations to distribute the losing side's territories between them. They called it the Mandate System, putting territories once controlled by the Ottoman and German empires under the, quote, tutelage of advanced nations until they became independent. Britain was given the mandate over Palestine, but the Palestinian people were never asked what they wanted or what independence would look like to them. Listen to what Balfour wrote to one of his colleagues.
For in Palestine we do not propose even to go through the form of consulting the wishes of the present inhabitants of the country.
Instead, it was the Zionists who were consulted about what their vision for Palestine was, and so the mandate ended up incorporating not just the Balfour Declaration, but several clauses requiring Britain to ensure the establishment of a Jewish home in Palestine. British rule was very accommodating to the Zionist project. The Jewish community in Palestine grew with big waves of immigration. They had their own schools and factories and even their own militia, the Haganah, and they were led by the Polish-born David Ben-Gurion, the leader of their representative body, the Jewish Agency. To the Palestinians, it was clear that Britain wasn't delivering them independence. It was delivering their country to other people. In 1936, they went on strike. British forces tried to break the strike with arrests, torture, mass punishment, and executions. Leaders were exiled, weapons confiscated, and houses blown up. Palestinian fighters attacked British and Jewish targets, while British and Haganah forces would carry out joint raids on Palestinian villages. Something had to change. The British government sent a commission called the Peel Commission to figure it out, but their proposed solution was typical. Just draw another British line on the map, divide the country, give this part to the Jews and this part to the Palestinians, and make that part of Transjordan next door. Oh, And because the Palestinians were a majority in the country, 250,000 of them would have to be removed by force to make the Jewish state viable. Remember, these were the proposals that were meant to calm things down. Spoiler, they didn't. Instead, the revolt continued until 1939, by which time about 10% of Palestine's adult male population had either been killed, injured, arrested, or exiled. The British government really needed a solution. So, here comes another report.
The Commission is studying the 20-year-old Jewish settlements in British-mandated Palestine.
The 1939 White Paper created a conflict between the British and the Zionists for the first time, because it rejected partition and said the solution was for Palestine to gain independence within 10 years, with everyone living there sharing it together. Crucially, it also imposed severe limits on Jewish land purchases and immigration. To the Zionists, this felt like a betrayal. In response, some set off bombs across the country, killing dozens of Palestinians. But soon, everyone was distracted by something much bigger. More than 60 million people were killed in World War II, including 6 million Jews murdered in Nazi death camps. Jewish survivors fled Europe, with a large number of them trying to find safety in Palestine despite the British limit on Jewish immigration. This set off a more direct confrontation between the Zionists and the British, with Palestinians often targeted as well. The Zionists knew two things. Militarily, they were stronger than the Palestinians, and Britain was exhausted by World War II, so it wouldn't have the stomach to keep fighting in Palestine. They were right. In 1947, after 30 years of occupation, Britain announced it was quitting Palestine and asked the newly formed United Nations to clean up its mess. Alright, 1947 and 1948 are the most pivotal years in this story, so let's take a look at how things are lining up. During British rule, Jews had gone from 10% to 30% of the population, and owned about 6% of the land. Under Ben-Gurion's leadership, the Jewish Agency was pretty much functioning as a government for the Jewish community. And the Zionist militias had tens of thousands of soldiers, modern weapons, and officers who'd already fought in World War II. On the other side, the Palestinians hadn't been allowed to develop their own administration or military. But as they waited for the UN solution, they were still the majority all over the country. In November 1947, the UN, then only made up of a fraction of the world's countries, voted to partition Palestine. This plan marked off 55% of the country for a Jewish state, but the UN never explained how it could be a Jewish state when half the people in its territory were Palestinian. To nobody's surprise, Palestinians, and in fact all Arabs, rejected the UN's plan. Ben-Gurion and the Zionist leadership accepted, but they saw an opportunity. With the British on the way out, the Zionists knew they would have the strongest military in Palestine. Their forces were instructed to seize more territory than they'd been awarded by the UN, and to do what was necessary to reduce the number of Palestinians in it. In cities like Haifa, the militia set off car bombs in Palestinian neighborhoods. They attacked villages and forced residents out.
Haganah troops have driven the Arabs out of the beleaguered city, taking many prisoners.
After inspecting parts of western Jerusalem that had been emptied of Palestinians, Ben-Gurion said,
"In many Arab neighborhoods in the West, you do not see even one Arab. If we persist, it is quite possible that in the next 6 or 8 months there will be considerable changes in the country, and to our advantage."
One of the events that helped speed up these changes took place on April 9th, 1948, when the village of Deir Yassin was attacked. A British government report to the United Nations describes the scene. 250 people were killed in circumstances of great savagery. Women and children were stripped, lined up, photographed, and then slaughtered by automatic firing. The story of what happened at Deir Yassin set off panic all over the country. As news spread, people fled, fearing they would be next. Historians have recorded dozens of similar massacres during this period. Each time, they would result in entire communities fleeing.
תמיד הייתה הוראה, והייתה הוראה של בן-גוריון, לגרש את האנשים משם. כבשנו את המקום, טרקטורים חרשו את המקום. חרשו. לא נשאר זכר שכבר. למה? לא רצו שתהיה, לא חזרה ולא זכר של המקום.
By the time Britain ended its mandate on May 15, 1948, 250,000 Palestinians had fled. the night before David Ben-Gurion announced the founding of the State of Israel, with himself as its first prime minister. He was standing under a giant portrait of Herzl, 51 years after Herzl had predicted this very moment. The Zionist militias came together as the newly formed Israel Defense Forces, but the fighting wasn't over. With the British out of the way, soldiers from several Arab countries entered Palestine. But the Israeli army was better equipped, better organized, and unlike the Arab armies, had a unified command and backing from several European countries. Israeli forces pushed into places that the UN had assigned to the Palestinian state, like the towns of Lidda and Ramle. 50,000 people were forced to flee from there, many on foot, in what became known as the Lidda Death March. After being emptied, the towns were given Hebrew names, Lod and Ramla. Like in many other emptied towns, the buildings and homes were taken over by the new Israeli state and given to Jews. By the time the UN secured an armistice, 3/4 of the Palestinian people had become refugees. In Arabic, they call this the Nakba, literally the catastrophe. The new state of Israel made up 78% of what had been Palestine. The remaining parts were annexed by Jordan or taken over by Egypt. A year later, the UN passed a resolution calling for all Palestinian refugees to be allowed to return home. They never have been. Palestine had been erased. In the decades since, attempts to resolve this conflict have again tried to partition the land. With each successive attempt, the territory offered to Palestinians in their historic homeland shrinks even more. Ironically, Israel is still struggling to maintain the population advantage it gained in 1948 when it forced all those people out, because in 1967 it occupied the West Bank and Gaza, bringing all the Palestinians living there under its rule. And so today, the population of Jews and non-Jews in this land is roughly equal. But those living under occupation have no rights, no citizenship, and no prospect of independence. The Nakba-era tactics of settlement, home demolitions, and expulsion are still used against them.
Nakba, Nakba, no! We want Nakba, Nakba, no!
Israel has taken the land but wants nothing to do with the millions under its rule. International, Israeli, and Palestinian human rights groups say this system is a form of apartheid. To see if that's an accurate description of Israel more than 100 years after Balfour's promise, watch this video here.
Palestinians aren't attacking them. They're fighting the Palestinians because they don't want to have Palestine integrated with them because they'll instantly lose their majority. There are actually 7 million Palestinians living in Palestine and Israel, but 5 million are confined to the concentration camp that we call the Gaza Strip. It's just a concentration camp. And then the ghetto that we call the West Bank. It's basically a bunch of little ghetto pockets. And so by doing that, what the Israelis have done is they've created a situation where the natives are in internal exile, right? They're still in Palestine. They're just not in their homes. Their homes are in Haifa or Jaffa or Jerusalem. And so they're displaced inside their own country as a majority, but with no rights to citizenship. This is like the most nasty thing since apartheid Israel and apartheid South Africa. It might be worse than apartheid South Africa in some ways.
What brings you here today? To support Palestinian rights. We as Jews are embarrassed what's happening there in the state of Israel, in the Jewish name. And what's your message to the people of Palestine? They shouldn't give up the struggle. They should continue to fight and not give up the struggle against the state of Israel, because by the end, Palestine will be free, because this is truth, will succeed by the end. What's your message to the people of Palestine?
They should know. We feel very shame what's going on there, especially they're doing everything in our name, in the name of Jews, in the name of the Torah, in the name of God. It's so shameful. We are with you. You have to know. The Zionists are strong. We are weak. But God is on our side. At the end of the day, the Palestinian flag will be on all Palestine, from the river to the sea.